Now the state's budget crisis of biblical proportions. Arizona maxes out a $700 million line of credit within a couple of weeks and may soon need to issue IOUs. Well, Dean, you're the guy. You have the IOUs hidden in a drawer somewhere?
Yeah, sort of. We have them locked up in the vault.
You must have spent it all at Barney's, I think, to make it go that fast.
I wish. We could have had a little more fun with it.
You did expect it to go that quickly.
We had been predicting 750. We hit 773. So we were pretty close to forecast, as gloomy as that is.
So what comes next? More borrowing?
No. Basically, this is all we can really do. We pushed the lenders as hard as we could to get the 700. We've got another 500 we can do internally. But beyond that, about 1.2 billion is about all we can do, because this has to be paid back by the end of the fiscal year. So you can't borrow more than you can pay back. And so this just buys them time to balance the budget.
But let's also understand here that it's fine to say we burned through the $700 million line of credit. But as even Dean admitted, it's not because we're out of everything else. It's just cheaper for us to borrow externally than it is to borrow internally, because there's a carrying cost even if we don't borrow the money. So it's not like, oh my God, we just burned through $700 million. And some of that gets replenished each day as revenues come in. So before people go out and start jumping off of buildings, understand there's maybe less here than meets the eye.
Less here, 700 million less what? It still sounds like a pretty huge number.
It's going to be close to $1 billion according to our forecast. Actually, it'll be about 1.1 by January. The rate money, basically, you've got more money going out than coming in. And that's why they're talking about selling the state buildings. In fact, if the sale of state buildings doesn't occur and the money doesn't come in before the end of January, we will not have cash or borrowing ability to make the school payment in February.
So we need to sell the state buildings for about, what, $1 billion?
735 is what they put in the bill.
Okay. David, is that a plan or a prayer?
It's a prayer. The legislature has to get together and actually do some of these real solutions that Howie's talking about, where we can do some things internally. You know, this budget situation has to be more comprehensive than just borrowing and paying it back by selling state buildings. This is the worst time to sell real estate, nationally and especially in our state. And we're going to sell some of our state's most valuable real estate just to get us through this year. The legislature has to get together and solve this problem.
Wait a second here. Again, you know, in terms of the credibility factor here, we are not selling buildings. We are borrowing against them. It's securitizing. It's one of those wonderful things that people like to talk about. Nobody's actually going to buy the Senate, buy the House, buy the Library and Archives building. We are essentially saying we want to borrow against it. Because of the way our Constitution reads, we have to pledge a specific source against that. Nobody's selling a building. This is not selling buildings outright. We are borrowing.
It's a sale leaseback.
It's a mortgage.
It's a mortgage.
It's a mortgage. Well, I mean, what happens on your home if you can't make your home payments? Who owns your home?
Understood. But to say that this is the worst time, I mean, given that interest rates are down, investors are willing to take less now than perhaps that they were, 4 years ago. So maybe this is the best time to do a sale leaseback.
Well, I don't think there's any good time to sell off our state capital.
We could have increased our bidders had we allowed whoever bid to evict some of the tenants. I think we would have had a lot of bidders on this thing.
Starting with,
I would have bid on the sucker if we could have done that.
I would have bid on the Senate if we can get our press room back.
The great hope is selling off the prisons, selling and leasing back the prisons. Is that going to happen?
I think it will, simply because this is really, like Howie says, this is a financial instrument that is just backed by the buildings. And, you look at it from a financial situation, they're going to give us $735 million, they're going to get $1.5 billion back. That's just good math. Bad for the state, bad for taxpayers, and not very good for economic development. I mean, who wants to invest in a state that has to rent its own capital building?
Very bad. Giving us a very bad name around the country. You're right there. Okay, thanks very much. Next up, the sheriff versus the judges. The panel gives its verdict.